this lesson, I'll summarize 7th grade Unit 4, Lesson 5, Say It with Decimals. Say what? So we can use long division or we can use a calculator to calculate the decimal representation of a fraction. For example, 5/8 just means 5 divided by 8. So if we want to calculate the decimal value of 5/8, we can simply do 5 divided by 8. And when we're trying to figure out how many times 8 goes into 5, you may recall you add a decimal point and a 0. Since 8 doesn't go into 5 any times, you can put a 0 there. And then 8 goes into 50. Check that out. Well, 8 goes into 50 6 times, so you place your 6 above. And then you multiply 6 times 8, and you get 48. You recall you're going to subtract here. 50 minus 48 is 2. And then we're going to add a 0 and bring down our 0. So then we're going to look, how many times does 8 go into 20? Well, 8 goes into 20 twice. 2 times 8 is 16. So I'm going to subtract again. I've got 4. And I keep going until I get it to repeat or terminate. So I'm going to add another 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. I have no remainder, so I'm done. So 5 divided by 8 is the same thing as 0.625. So a terminating decimal, that's just a decimal that ends. So 0.625 it ends, so we call it a terminating decimal. Sometimes our decimals don't terminate, so we can use long division, or again, we could use a calculator to calculate the decimal representation of a fraction. So if I tell you 7/12, that would be 7 divided by 12. So a repeating decimal is a decimal with numbers or groups of numbers that repeat indefinitely. So the one we just did, 0.583, with the 3 repeating, that's a repeating decimal. So we just put a bar over whatever repeats. In this case, it was only the 3. All right, I'll give you a little problem with an equation and expression. Priya earns X dollars doing chores, and Kieran earns 6/5 as much as Priya. How much does Kieran earn? All right, one way you could write this is you could just say Kieran earns 6/5 X. Or it might be convenient for you to notice 6/5 is 1.2, so Kieran earns 1.2x. What if I said Kieran earns Y dollars doing chores and Priya earns 5/6 as much as Kieran? How much does Priya earn? So in this case, you could say 5/6Y, or maybe you could change it into 0.83 repeating Y. All right, you're going to notice that sometimes it's easier to work with a decimal representation of a number, and sometimes it's easier to work with a fractional representation, especially when you're dealing with those repeating decimals. But when you're wanting to use a calculator, sometimes the decimal is a lot easier. When we're going to percents, decimals make it easier too. So today's goals, I understand that half as much again and multiplied by 1.5 mean the same thing. 1.5, same as 1.5. Could you write x plus 0.5x just as 1.5x? And are you able to write fractions as decimals?